Good evening and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Dalhousie Horrocks National Leadership Lecture. Delighted to welcome you from wherever you're joining us and whatever time it is for you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and ceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And we pay respect to the Indigenous knowledges held by the Mi'kmaq people and to the wisdom of their elders, past and present. The Mi'kmaq people signed peace and friendship treaties with the Crown, and Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982 recognizes and affirms Aboriginal and treaty rights. We are all treaty people. And wherever you're joining us from today, I'll encourage you to pause for a moment and reflect on where you are in the world and the people who came before you. At Dalhousie, we also recognize that African Nova Scotians are distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. I'm delighted that we're able to join from these lands to talk today about leadership. And it's such a critical part of what happens here at the Faculty of Management through our training and through our research. We're working with all sorts of people, including the Horrocks family, to support students, to push forward information at this critical time in the world where information is so essential and it feels so under attack. But you didn't sign on today to hear from me, so I'm going to hand over to Sandra Toes, the Department Chair for the Department of Information Science, the Director of the MI program, and all of our information programs, which is why she's so busy all of the time, to introduce our guest speaker tonight, who I'm very excited for. Sandra.
Thank you so much, Mike. And welcome to everyone, as Mike said, from joining us from wherever you are. This event today is both in honor of Norman and exists because of Norman. There is the official information, the story of Dr. Horrocks, who was a former director of the School of Information Management and, in fact, dean of the Faculty of Management. He was actively involved in professional associations across the globe throughout his life and was awarded with so many local, national, and international awards that we can't even list them all. But he just had such a profound impact on the field and on the careers of so many people. But beyond these honors, it is the profound impact Dr. Horrocks had on our Master of Information degree and on the Faculty of Management. For many of us, for many years, Dr. Horrocks was the program. He was part of the team that ensured we received our first ALA accreditation. He recruited many of the key people to Dow. He was consistently our strongest advocate in the field and the need to have this degree both within Dalhousie and within the region. As we work with the next generations of leaders in this field, the skills and qualities that Norman embodied remain central to this profession. He was a social networker long before social media. He always found a way to connect people and information and people to other people. He was an incredible builder of community, and he was famous for his Friday fireside chats. He was endlessly curious and loved engaging with students, faculty, and professionals. We are, as will be discussed today, at a pivotal time in many ways in this profession. And the example of Dr. Horrocks helps shed the light on the way forward, focused on embracing all. So to continue his leadership and advocacy for the field, the fund in his name supports both a scholarship and a lecture series. With the money from this fund, we are able to bring outstanding leaders to our community to help us negotiate and understand the evolving landscape. We are also able to support outstanding students. So we will be doing both of those today. First, we will have the lecture, and then we will present this year's Horrocks Award. We are very excited to once again use this lecture to bring a critical conversation to our community. I would like to welcome and introduce Emily Drabinski. Emily, who probably needs no introduction, like Dr. Horrocks, is currently an associate professor at Queen's College Graduate School of Library and Information Studies. She publishes and presents widely on topics related to knowledge organization, information literacy, and critical perspectives in librarianship. She edits Gender and Sexuality in Information Studies, a book series from Library Juice. And in 2020, she received the Career Achievement Award from the Association of College and Research Libraries Women and Gender Studies section. She currently, of course, is serving as the president of the American Library Association. We are very honored and thankful that you've been able to join us today, Emily.
Thank you so much, Sandra, and thank you so much for the invitation to join you all for this year's Horrocks National Leadership Lecture. I'll be honest, when Sandra reached out to me in September with this invitation, it took me a bit by surprise. Leadership? What do I know about that? Honestly, I don't think of myself as a leader as much as I think of myself as a collaborator and a comrade, and I absolutely take my cues from the people around me. I am interested in us much more than I am interested in me, and the idea of leadership, I guess, always has had a little bit in my head the sense of the individual in the corner office, and my office is definitely not in the corner. But then I took some time to learn about Norman Horrocks, the individual we honor with this lecture today, and it turns out that he and I have quite a bit in common. Like Dr. Horrocks, I am deeply committed to the infrastructure of the profession of librarianship. I believe in libraries. I believe in libraries as one of the last remaining institutions committed to the public good and examples of public good themselves. And I believe in the infrastructure of the profession, the role that professional associations play in making librarianship possible. Like me, Dr. Horrocks served on the Council of the American Library Association, the governing body of ALA, though my one term is dwarfed by Dr. Horrocks' 21 years of service. And both of us developed an appreciation for the value of parliamentary procedure and meeting rules as the means to make collective decisions. As I was reading about Dr. Horrocks, I was struck by his love for bylaws, something that people mentioned in their remembrances of him. And I wouldn't say I'm quite there in terms of loving bylaws, but I am on my way. Understanding the bylaws and how to revise them and how to use them and how to deploy them, that's one way of getting things done. And me, just like Norman, I really like to get things done. Dr. Horrocks was a giant in the field of librarianship and information studies, and he was also a giant within the ALA. Reading remembrances of Dr. Horrocks in preparation for today was an opportunity for me to encounter his legacy as a librarian, as a teacher, as a deep, committed historian of the American Library Association, and I'm grateful to the committee that selected me for the lecture this year, in no small part because I've been able to learn about the crucial role Dr. Horrocks played in creating this profession where I've made my career and in some fundamental ways my life. And I can tell you, as president of the American Library Association at this, is it an unprecedented time in American history, it has certainly taken over large portions of my life. So thank you for the opportunity to join you here today. It was also good to learn about someone else who takes as a given the importance of professional associations, like the American Library Association, like the Association for Library and Information Science Educators, like the Canadian Federation of Library Associations. The value of associations isn't something I think we can take for granted anymore. Dr. Horrocks is described repeatedly as a council groupie by those who remember him from the ALA governance floor. His was a time when professional associations flourished, when we joined because of the ways associations facilitate the shared work of forging the field of librarianship. When Dr. Horrocks was active in the association, membership climbed steadily from 3,257 in 1980 to a height of more than 61,000 at the time of his death. When I took over as president this past June, those numbers looked a little different. We're hovering right now right around 48,000. And I think in part that's because the landscape for professional associations like ours is a little different. We are in many ways less resourced and in many ways less supported in our work as professional volunteers. And I can tell you from doing all of the work to pull people together to serve on ALA committees and to drive forward the work of the association, many of us are working at capacity. And I think that is something we need to recognize as we look for the leaders who will bring our association and our profession into the future. Those declining numbers do not mean that professional associations are less necessary than they used to be. I would argue, in fact, that the opposite is true. Since I took office last June, the fight against organized attempts to censor materials in libraries has dominated my days. Everywhere I go, even in ostensibly liberal places like New York City, where you'd think this would never happen, library workers are facing challenges to their agency and authority. School and public librarians select books for their communities. That's the job of many of us. We use professional review tools to make decisions. We draw on standards and guidelines we learn in school. We keep up to date with the latest trends and strategies at conferences and classes and workshops, and through the networks of practitioners made possible by library organizations. Efforts to ban and censor library materials are also attacks on librarian expertise and agency. They weaken trust in us as workers and trust in the institutions where we practice our craft. We need our professional associations in moments like this one. We need leadership in these associations to both document the challenges we face and to advocate for the importance of our work. As ALA president, I draw on the strength and wisdom of colleagues from across the United States and the world to keep my head on straight and point it in the right direction. We really need each other, and our associations bring us together. We also need leadership, and we need it desperately, and I think leadership of a particular kind. We need leadership that understands the importance of bringing people together around a common goal, leadership that can organize the vast majority of those of us who believe in libraries, who care about the right to read for everyone, who trust library workers to do their best work with the needs of the community in mind. And I think of like everywhere I go, I'm talking about banned books, and I was on a panel just last night where people were asking me about all of the challenges that libraries are facing right now. And, it's a small minority of people who challenge us and challenge our work. When the ALA ran we did a survey to see how many Americans trust their libraries to make good decisions about collections for their communities. 71% agreed. When the Michigan Library Association ran a similar survey just a couple of years later, that number was skyrocketed all the way up into the 90%. And I think that speaks to the fact that when libraries are under attack and people begin to see that happening, it's a little bit surprising, right? The vast majority of us believe in libraries and believe in the right to read. And so the task for us as leaders and as librarians and as a profession and as associations is to pull people together, the majority of us, so that we can stand strong against the vanishingly small minority of people who are intent on restricting not just the right to read, but the right to imagine, the right to have ideas, the right to learn, anything that we want. One of the fundamental freedoms, human freedoms that I think we need to prioritize and value. So now I'm going to tell you two short stories about my own experiences as a leader in this field. Since you said I was one, I'm going to hold on to that. I am. So here's two examples. One afternoon in October 2021, I was sitting in my office at the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. And I was having one of those days that more of us have more often than I think we talk publicly about. I was totally bored. I was swiveling around in my chair, staring at the ceiling with the posture of my recalcitrant teenager, slid down low, wondering, like, what is the point of all of this? Some of you must have those days in your libraries. And it wasn't a role, I was just a year and change into my term as the interim chief librarian at the Graduate Center Library at CUNY. It wasn't a role I had particularly sought for myself. For the first 20 years of my career, I had studiously avoided any formal leadership position. Who wants to be the boss? I would rather be a librarian. I love stapler repair. I love the reference interview. I love troubleshooting the printer. I love figuring out that knotty interdisciplinary research problem. I love pointing the way to the bathroom. And when you're the boss, you don't get to do those things very often. There's a basket of skills that are important for formal leaders, and frankly, I don't have them all. I don't like managing a budget, not even my own. My Excel skills were and are continue to be limited to calculating sums. And even that, I have to look up on Google how to do it every time. But sometimes when you've been doing the same kind of work for 20 years, it can get a little boring. I've spent decades now showing students how to find 5 evidence-based, peer-reviewed articles from core nursing journals about wound care. So when the chief librarian at the Graduate Center took on an interim position as university librarian at CUNY, someone needed to step up and be the boss. I raised my hand, ready for a change, and frankly, ready for the salary bump. I started in my role on March 15th, 2020. You may remember March 2020. My first act as the leader of my library was to close it. If you were in a formal leadership position in a library in March 2020, You know what that meant for what you had to do. When I was writing this talk, I took a minute to look back at my calendar from that third week in March, the week that I hope to not, that I try not to think about very often. The time when, for me in New York City, the wheels came totally off my normal life. We had so many meetings and so many conversations. What are we going to do with this global pandemic hitting us in New York City in ways that were, I'm sure you remember from the news, devastating and dire? My week calendar is full of Zoom links. My job became suddenly about making sure everyone had the tools they needed to do their jobs from home. I read an article about workplace management once and it stuck with me, and it said that that there are two sure predictors of workplace happiness. The first is the presence of a work friend, so I always try to make sure I have one of those, and the second is the tools necessary to do one's job. So as a library leader in that moment, leadership meant figuring out how, inside of a vast public sector bureaucracy, to send desk chairs and gel wrist pads and optical mice to the homes of a couple dozen library workers. And I had to figure out how to make the library go, all from my bedroom in Brooklyn, New York, with a staff spread all around the city, my girlfriend in the living room, my middle schooler trying to learn from his bedroom. There was a lot of pain in those initial weeks and a lot of silence and a lot of rushed spreadsheets, a lot of stabs in the dark, and a lot of flying blind. This was my first turn as a titular leader, and I learned a lot about the power it gives you. I got to tell you, if you haven't had it, formal decision-making power is a trip. After 2 decades as a rank-and-file library worker, I suddenly discovered that I was the boss, and an awful lot was up to me. If I wanted to spend my budget on a desk chair for Harry so we can continue to process interlibrary loan requests while the building was closed without activating his sciatica, I could do that. If I wanted to use our collections budget to purchase digitized primary source collections, I could do that too. If I wanted to use our budget to retain library workers during the long period of closure, I was actually given fairly broad authority to even do that. Just as I had long suspected, when you're the boss, you can decide things. And I'll have to admit here that I made a lot of bad decisions too. Bosses will do that. Maybe you've had a boss who's done that before. I also quickly ran up against the limits of that position. As my good friend Kelly McElroy, a librarian at Oregon State University, often says, if you have a boss, you are not the boss. And that was certainly true for me. I reported to the provost, and a big part of the gig was carrying out the directives of the provost. Sometimes this was very easy. I had to let the staff know that the university had purchased N95 masks and hand sanitizer for distribution throughout the building. Sometimes it was harder. When the provost said to prepare budget scenarios with 5, 10, and 15% cuts, I prepared budget scenarios with 5, 10, 15% cuts. Didn't like it? That's what I had to do. When the provost told me to open the library to students, I dutifully opened the library to students, even as my colleagues fought to keep the building closed until union-approved COVID protocols were followed. When the provost said trim casualized staff, I prepared lists of staff whose contracts were up and could be non-renewed without too much friction. While I had some power as the manager in the middle, the people above me held far more. And those were the people I spent the most time with. This part was really new for me. As a regular library worker, I'd always been really into creating good vibes. I'm like a good vibes person. I was the person who bought a toaster for the break room and stocked Pop-Tarts so we'd have a reason to gather around for the first big toast in our brand new machine. We made a video, posted it on the internet. It was super fun. I always come to the party, and I'm always good for $20 for it. I'm the guy who picks up the tab at happy hour. I spring for another round of bowling. We spend a lot of our time at work, and I think it's super important that we have some fun and enjoy ourselves and stay connected. It's been a super important part of how I work. And my colleagues have always been my source of energy, wisdom, and comradeship. When we're in a struggle for resources, recognition, and the other things we fight for in the workplace, the bonds we build to and with each other are unmatched. Nothing brings the room together like that giant life-size stuffed bear Anne-Marie always inexplicably brought to the library holiday party. The only thing that beats that, she was huge and had it would wear like a little holiday wreath around its neck, and then it would come out for other parties and would wear a tie. So that brings people together. But what really brings us together is organizing collectively to get something that we need. We need a new printer, we need salary increases, we need increased reference desk staffing. When we pull together and organize because we want to make some change happen and we win it, that's what brings people together. So as chief librarian, I kept company with higher education administrators, not with the people who worked in the library. And frankly, this wasn't a choice of mine or of theirs. It was structural. The power that was allocated to me was structural. It wasn't because I was Emily that I got to make those decisions. It was because I was sitting in the seat of the chief librarian. And some of the antagonism that I experienced between me and my colleagues was structural as well. We could consult and collaborate all we wanted, and we did a lot of that, but at the end of the day, the decisions were mine to make. I decided whether we purchased ebooks from Project Muse or a primary source collection from Gale. That was up to me. So I led from that position and I can lead from that position, but the leading there is lonely. Whatever I managed to do on my own was dwarfed by what we actually needed. I had the power to decide about spending our money this way or that way, but what I did not decide and couldn't was the size of the budget in the first place. I could advocate forcefully, articulate our value, pull up numbers on a spreadsheet with the help of some other people in the office, but my power to grow that bottom line number, I simply didn't have it. And that is what I've always been more interested in. How do we grow the size of the pie? I'm a little less interested in how we slice it, because that is the problem that I think is facing American libraries right now, and probably libraries in Canada as well. We find ourselves forced to struggle over what little is left following a project of organized disinvestment in public institutions and the public good that has marked my entire lifespan. I've worked in libraries for more than 20 years, and I have never seen a new position for someone in the back office, a new technical service position. This has never happened to any library I've ever worked in. And that's got to be true for a lot of you listening as well. There's probably a moment for most of us as we climb the ladders that have been made available to us, when we grab a rung with our hands, and just as we're about to pull up our leg, we have a flash. Why am I climbing this particular ladder? Am I climbing the ladder because it is the one in front of me? Do I really want to go up in this direction? And that was the question I was pondering that October day in 2021, bored and swiveling around in my chair. And the thing I did in that moment was send a quick email to ALA saying, I'd like to nominate myself for president of the American Library Association. It certainly relieved some of the boredom. Now I'd like to tell you a second story about experience as a leader in the field. I'm going to take a drink of water. In 2016, I was on the faculty of, in the library faculty of Long Island University's downtown Brooklyn campus. And it was, we were coming to the end of a round of contract negotiations and ended up experiencing some pretty intense disruption of my life and my work. We were part of the first lockout of faculty in the history of American higher education. And we thought we were maybe first in the world, but unfortunately that honor is held by Canada. The University of Nova Scotia had the first. But at the time, I was not in a position of formal leadership, unless you count taking the minutes in union meetings as secretary. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about leading from that position, the position of simply a member of the faculty. We were coming down to the end of contract negotiations for a new contract that would start September 1st. 3 days before that, it was a Wednesday, we got an email from administration notifying us that the faculty would be locked out at the end of those contract negotiations on Friday, unless we acceded to the demands made by administration. So if you haven't been locked out, I'll tell you a little bit about what that's like. In a labor action where we go on strike, workers withhold their labor in an attempt to make management do what they want. In a lockout, the opposite is true. Management fires everyone en masse, creating a situation where you will bend to their will. So we found out on a Wednesday we were locked out as of Friday. That meant that we were prohibited from coming on campus. We were locked out of our offices, locked out of our classrooms. We could no longer access our email. We had all of our courses that were up on our learning management system. We were blocked from those, and temporary workers were hired to fill in those classes, and administrators were assigned to teach classes in our stead. In one case, the most notorious, the dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, an 88-year-old trained biologist, was assigned to teach a modern dance class that had previously been taught by an Alvin Ailey dancer. We lost our health insurance. In the United States, our health insurance is tied to employment. It was gone. Whether you were sick, we had members who had end-stage lung cancer. We had a member who was pregnant. Health insurance was canceled, and our salaries were stopped. And all of us rely on our salaries to pay our rent. And we watched as for people in formal leadership positions, carried out that very damaging anti-worker action. When you are a person in a position of formal leadership, you kind of have to carry out the demands of the people above you. And that moment called for a different kind of leadership. And it was inside of that crucible that I developed an analysis of leadership that I deploy now in my work as the president of the American Library Association. We need leaders who could pull people together. We needed leaders who could build mass action. We needed leaders who could turn people out, who could make phone calls and get people to come out to meetings and events and rallies so that we could protest and fight back. I'll describe one of those actions for you that I think was the most impactful and important of the experience. Because they had canceled our salaries, all of us were put in a position where we had to apply for unemployment insurance, many of us for the first time in our lives. Tenured faculty members who'd been tenured for 70 years, like had to figure out a way to apply for unemployment insurance online. Now, if you work in a library like me, you know that helping people fill out online forms is a big part of the job. And the librarians, I have to say, were fantastic about it. We decided to hold an event where we would call people and pull them into a room. We'd all bring our laptops, and the librarians would go person by person, helping people fill out the unemployment insurance form so that they could get a little bit of funding while they survived. This required leadership from all positions, right? And it required not just people in positions of formal leadership, but people who know how to lead other people. And I learned a very simple definition of leadership in that time. A leader is someone that other people follow. So what we did is we built a spreadsheet, something that librarians are good at doing, not me, but many of us. And we used that spreadsheet to list every single person in the faculty and made sure that we called every single person on the faculty to get them to come out to the meeting. Now, I, Emily Drabinski, can't call every single person on the faculty. So my job was to look for other leaders who could bring other people with them. So we located people who were, Sam, he was a professor in the biology department. What Sam did and said, everybody in the sciences did, right? So if we could win over Sam and get Sam committed to come to the event, he would bring everyone with him. So we found Sam. We found Marty. We found all kinds of people who would pull people out to that rally. And we documented the power that we were building as we pulled those people together. So in our spreadsheet, we'd make a mark. This person's coming. This person's willing to organize other people to come. This person is not coming and is organizing people not to come to the event, right? And we were able to, using a spreadsheet and some tracking software, ensure that we had everybody accounted for and that we could get a super majority of the people who were locked out on that faculty in that room together, both to help each other in terms of signing up for that unemployment insurance and getting some help from a librarian, but also to ensure that we stayed connected to one another. Because when we're facing issues that require a mass action rather than a good decision by a good boss, we got to make sure we've got everybody in the room. And that was the kind of leadership that I think expands the size of the pie, that can actually move the needle and make bigger demands from our institutions than the ones we're able to make from a position of formal leadership. It relies on bringing more people into the struggle. On that day, we had a majority of the faculty in a room, helping each other, hanging out together when we got a call from someone who was hanging out on the campus, watching to see what was going to happen with the students. And the students had organized themselves. Student leaders had pulled together to do a mass walkout from the school, arguing that, like, this isn't what we came for. We didn't come to be trained in dance by a biologist. We came here to be trained in dance by a dancer. And that faculty member was able to call us back at the cafe where we were working together and say, the students are walking out. And it produced a moment where all of us, through the leadership of our students and the leadership of all of the people on the faculty who had pulled together that room to stand up together en masse, walk over to the campus and join those students in the biggest mass action of the entire lockout. After 12 days, we were able to successfully get the administration to bend, to let us back in to our classrooms, to restart our health insurance and salaries, and to begin the work of negotiating a better contract. It was leadership that brought more people into the struggle, ensuring that people have the capacity to act and ensuring that all of us got the experience of collective power. And I think that is the energy that we need to bring to our professional associations in this crucial moment. Because we're not at a moment in American libraries and in Canadian libraries too. I was just at the OLA Super Conference last week, and I wish that the problem of book bans, censorship, and the undermining of our authority and agency was simply an American problem. But this is a global library problem that we need to address. And it takes more than one good decision by the person who's the president of the ALA. It requires all of us to be working together and organizing each other in order to move the needle on the issues that matter most to us. So a leader is someone other people follow. It's our task as leaders, and all of us are leaders. It's our task to look for those people, to pull them in along with the people who respond to them. And it's what I do every day as the president of ALA. And I traveled across the country, across the world, talking to librarians and trying to find out who are our leaders and how do we bring the people in. And this is a fight I think we all owe each other, and the energy that we owe to each other in this moment, because we're in a fight not just for the right to read, the right to have access to books and stories about queer and Black experience. We're in a fight for the library itself and everything that the library means. We're in a fight for the public good, which has been under consistent attack since I was born. Both the public good that the library facilitates and the public good that is the library itself. So there's two different leadership stories, both important, and I'm hoping to make the case in this talk and in the question and answer period about the value of leadership that recognizes all of us can lead from any position we're in, as long as we stay committed to the good that is in libraries. Those are the remarks I had to share with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emily. I really appreciated those stories. In particular, as someone who's both been a librarian and been a faculty member, and in particular, it resonating with the fact that, even when we are in leadership positions, those are part of a structure, and there's only, there is limits, and the way to really move the needle is to work together. So very sort of inspiring questions. And before I go to the audience for questions, one of the courses I currently teach is management strategy, organizational.
I teach management as well. Yeah.
So, and one of the things I always start with is when we look in our field and you actually look at the studies that have been done, most librarians do not enter the field to be leaders. So just, wondered, in thinking about your own experiences and reflecting on that, how can we potentially change the narrative of what leadership is so that people can see themselves more in that?
Yeah, I think, it's a good question. And I definitely didn't want to be in management, and I didn't want to be a leader. I just wanted to work at the library. And when I asked my class, and I just started class last week, how many of you wanted to be managers? The number is vanishingly small. Nobody got in it for that. And I think it's helpful to make the distinction that we often make between management and leadership. Right? That management is one piece of that, and we do need good managers. One of the things I was able to do in that formal leadership position was advocate for my colleagues. We had a few people working out of title, and I was able to move them up in title, because I do think if you're willing to push the administrative buttons, you can actually make a real difference in the lives of individuals from those positions of formal leadership. But I also think we need to recognize that leading can come from all positions, and that it takes everybody, and that you don't turn into an evil person, right? I did think I'll become the boss and then I'll be a bad guy, and there were some elements of that I think are structural and you can't really get away from them. But you can really do good work when you have formal authority and power, which I learned, even though I don't think I'll do it again. It was a lot of work. It's a lonely place. So I think we need supports for people who are in those positions so that they feel a little less lonely.
Yep. And someone to do our Excel spreadsheets, because I'm with you on that one. It's I can do them, but
yeah, I have to Google it every time. So
excellent. So our first question comes from Boyd Holmes. When it comes to the fight against censorship, how do you respond to the recent cases in Halifax? And you may not know them, so I can give you a bit of context there. Ottawa and Whitehorse, to ban the book Irreversible Damage on the grounds that it's anti-trans.
I don't know that case specifically. If you can give me a little.
I believe that
background.
is the Abigail Schreier book. And so,
Okay.
the issue was that the libraries, using their own policies, felt that the book, it was not considered hate speech, so it fit with their collection development. So it was in their collection along with many other books. But in Halifax in particular, this led to a split with the LGBTQ community and moving away. So it just created a lot of discussion, but not necessarily productive discussion. So it was quite destructive.
These are really tough questions. And one of the things I love about working in libraries is that these are real, like we are material spaces, right? Like the decisions we make are not abstract. They are not in the sort of universe of the speculative, right? I was at this event last night, and somebody who doesn't work in libraries and has really doesn't have to go to the library, right? His argument was that you could always buy a book, so it's not censorship, that kind of person. And he was sort of talking as if this was purely a decision you could make in the abstract. And I think censorship is not an abstraction. We have to look at what our community wants, what it needs, what our budgets are, and make decisions about books that we're going to collect. And it is appropriate, I think, for community members to challenge and take, demand things from public institutions. That's completely appropriate. And that kind of struggle and argument and debate is sort of what we do as public institutions. And so I think, not knowing the particulars, making decisions about books that meet the reading needs of everyone is sort of what we do for a living. That's what our job is. And all of those decisions are local. So I can't really speak to what is happening in those particular locations, because I think the decisions that people are forced to make in these highly politicized times, people are constrained by the circumstances around them.
Absolutely. And I think, that is one of the issues that we're trying to sort of bring into the classroom and have conversations, because in many times, as I sort of mentioned to students, the values we have may clash. So then you have to make decisions through that scenario. Here's a question from Rebecca Marjoram. What skills have you really had to lean into since you stepped into these formal leadership roles? Is there anything that surprised you, or any skills that you'd like to develop further?
I did not anticipate, and maybe this sounds silly, I did not anticipate the intense public attention and pressure that I would experience. And I don't know that that happens to everyone in a position of leadership in a professional association, or if it's just sort of what happened to me. It's a difficult time to be sort of under the microscope. So even when I'm giving this talk, I'm trying to be honest and authentic about how I think about leadership, and also in my mind understand that there, maybe people watching who will clip it in ways that are, that I didn't anticipate. And I don't know if that's new in our highly politicized environment. It also, it has surprised me just how much I have to collaborate with other people, the size of the net, it's just like there's a lot more moving pieces and parts than I think I anticipated. Skills I'd like to develop further, I do think understanding how to tell stories with data is super important right now. And that is a skill that I have to keep working at every day. I think using numbers to make our case publicly is really important work that I really I need some more help with, since I'm not great at spreadsheets or the math that goes on inside of them, to be honest. But that's why we have other people, right? Like, you're never leading alone. You look for the
That's
people who
what I
know
was
how to
going
do
to
that well, and you
say.
pull them in. Yeah.
Exactly. Not only collaborating with others, but one of the things that in our program, students do have to take data in courses and work with data, and that's one of the reasons, is because when we see a little look at this, the skills needed to be successful in the world right now, data is at the top of it. So yeah. This question comes from Christopher Popovich. I appreciate your thoughts on not doing formal library leadership and perhaps leading from the coalface. Can you expand a little more on the case for seeking formal leadership?
We need more good people who care about people seeking formal leadership. I think that is really totally necessary. I found that part of what felt lonely is that there weren't more people like me in the room. I think when people seek leadership because they want a title, that's, and there's a lot of that, I'll be honest, that I think can lead to, at least for me, led to being in rooms where people didn't value the things that I valued, right? And I think that's especially true in libraries. We need people who value the library, who value the good work that we do, who value the people who work in a library, who make the library go, to be in those formal leadership positions. One of the things I really regret, or one of the things I say often, is never act alone, right? Anytime you act alone is very bad. So you get stranded and left lonely and left sort of hanging out to dry. So I think it's really, really important to bring people with you. So the one thing I would say is, if you're going to look for a formal leadership position, try to get your friends to do it with you. And in many cases, libraries will have multiple positions in terms of formal leadership that they'll be filling at the same time. And so making sure that you bring some comrades with you on the way, I think could be a good way to handle that. Yeah.
Great suggestion. Next question from Randy Barkhouse. Are librarians being adequately used to educate patrons on how to recognize misinformation and disinformation? And I'm sure you're particularly thinking about this with some of the election things happening in the States right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think, because I think a lot about the book ban and censorship issues that we're dealing with in libraries right now. But what I see as the end game of that, and I think we need a richer analysis than just the book censorship. Because if you have children, that the books that they might be reading are not the big threat, right? I have a teenager. I know that the books he reads are one thing, but what he sees and scrolls through on his phone is something else. And so the arguments that we must protect children and protect the public from these dangerous books feels disingenuous on that front. And also because I've never met somebody who both wants to protect children from books that document queer and Black experience, and they also want, they often want that, and then they also want to end food programs for kids, right? If you're really concerned about school, kids' safety, you would be concerned about people going hungry and houseless. Those things don't seem to sit together. So I think it's not about the book. So the censorship sort of fight is about undermining the institution of libraries and undermining the trust in librarians as authorities to make decisions about what information is included in our collections. So not that we're we never make mistakes, but we do have professional training and are good at our jobs. And so I think when you undermine our authority, you undermine our capacity to talk to people about misinformation and disinformation, because we become not the trusted authority in your community, which is what librarians and teachers have always been, but instead we become people that can't be trusted to make good decisions about information in our communities. So those things go hand in hand. So I think we're not being adequately used, and in fact, our capacity to address the problem of misinformation and disinformation, they're actively undercutting our ability to do that work for nefarious ends, right? And I think we have to be really honest and clear about that it's not about the safety of children. It's about preventing lots and lots of people from the right to know.
And just sort of following along with that, I think, in Canada, I think it was the Urban Libraries Count. They basically came out with a new report called Overdue. And, I think it's like these kind of documents are critical, trying to show the impact that we have in so many different ways, and saying, in fact, speaking of the public good, we're one of the last places. So we need more resources. Mike Smith has a question. Did taking on a structural leadership position and then returning to rank and file permanently change your relationship with your colleagues? Asking for a friend. Mike, of course, is you might not realize, he's currently acting.
Okay. So Mike, I see you. It did not. I think the division is structural. And I learned that really quickly. And, I've been a New York librarian forever. And so everybody I was working with were good friends. And they were my colleagues and comrades. And we recognized that structurally we couldn't be connected. But really, as soon as I came back to the position, I was able to restart those relationships and feel good and close to my colleagues. So it's structural, which means when you go back, you go back. Yeah.
Great, just waiting for there we go. A question from Dell Management. Question from Robin Parker. Do you have tips for leadership in more mundane times, such as trying to walk the talk of EDIA in the face of resistance from the status quo?
Yeah, I think, that is what most of us experience most of the time, mundane times. And even now, like much of the work that I do at ALA is mundane. It's about, trying to move the core values discussion and getting the pieces and parts straight that we need to be able to sign a contract for something. And so there's a lot of mundane work. I wouldn't say that walking the talk of EDIA is mundane, but it is, that's where I really think the lessons we learn from collective work and collective action those are really valuable. So when we want to sort of move the needle on that, we're going to need everybody with us. And so the leadership piece, I think, is getting, I think there's some resistance in the status quo, but at least where I work and live, many, many more of us have, interest in equity, right? And inclusion. Like, it's very challenging for that not to be like something that we're committed to. So remembering that there are more of us than there are of them, I think is super helpful, right? That we are not alone in this work, that we have others around us. And so making sure that we pull all of those people together. Because I think we often hear the loudest voice, or the voice that's the most authoritative. We hear that as the most important one, and I think it isn't, right? And which is why I think making a spreadsheet and counting it up is so super valuable, because you will find that the vast majority of people are with us. The vast majority of people want those things. And so pulling people together and building campaigns to make change happen, I think, is important.
Excellent. While we're waiting for the next question, I also, anytime I get to speak to someone like you, I always want to ask on behalf of our students, sort of, what are sort of the most important things for them to consider as we are sending them out into workplaces that are very different than, let's say, the workplace that I entered, 30 years ago?
The work is really important. It's really important. It's some of the most important work that people do. I try to think of other institutions that are open to everyone, like a library is. And, I think it's the library and it's the post office. And there's a lot more to do at the library than there is at the post office. And so really remembering that the work has value. And we talk a lot about vocational awe, this concept from the
Yes.
name's gone out of my head. Help me.
No,
Fabazi, Attar, right?
We kind of bookend it, so we try and talk about it at the
Yeah.
beginning and then come back to it.
So Fabazi's crucial intervention in the field about, you know, that this is not a saintly job. It's not a vocation that requires us to give of ourselves endlessly. But I think it's that's true, and it's also important to remember that the work really matters. And so, you know, it will be hard, and it will take you a while to find a job, probably, which I'm sorry about. You know, but you'll find one, and when you get to do the work, it's like really super important that we you know, I can't think of another institution that is as focused as libraries are on ensuring that everyone has access to a life that is allows them to flourish, that has more in it than just bare life, right? That has joy in it, pleasure in it, like the chance to read a book or learn a new skill, or, you know, I've visited libraries and they do incredible things. I was over Christmas at a library in a small mountain town in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and I needed to submit my grades because I was late. Sorry, everybody. And I needed a Wi-Fi signal, you know, and we didn't have one in the house and that we were staying in. And so I went to the library and I used their Wi-Fi signal and was able to submit my grades. And then I turn around and what's on the shelf next to me? Snowshoes that you could just check out and borrow from the library and take them out, you know, just like across the parking lot. They're hiking trails. And it was just extraordinary and amazing. And that's what, like, every library I go to has another thing like that that just blows me away, where it's just like people looking at the people in their community, thinking about what they might need, and then doing the work to pull together the resources necessary to get those things to them. And that there's no more important work that we could be doing right now. And librarianship is important and it matters. And I that's a touchstone I turn to again and again so that I don't feel overwhelmed. Because, you know, I woke up this morning to news that multiple states are pulling out of the American Library Association because of its, you know, ostensibly political viewpoint, you know, and it's just like it bummed me out, to be perfectly honest. And so that what do I do in those moments? I return to the fact that we make people's lives better. That's our job, and that's good work. We do good work.
And Mike had sort of suggested one question that I'm going to take advantage of you being here to ask you, because of course, as all programs, we are accredited by the ALA and we're sort of midway through right now. So one of the things that we were wondering and sort of thinking, you know, and we obviously are doing all the things you should be doing, but from your perspective on that sort of 5 to 10 year timeline, what should we be doing to think about, you know, ensuring our curriculum is helping students be ready for the challenges that they will likely be facing?
I think the focus on DEIA work is absolutely crucial and absolutely necessary. That is work that will be ongoing, that we need students coming out of library school committed to those values and committed to doing the work of making libraries and the library profession a place where everybody can find a home. So coming out with a sense of both the importance of those values, but also some ideas about how to actualize them in real life, which is always the challenge for us as librarians. How do we take our lofty ideals of intellectual freedom and access to everything for everyone and make those things real? And so both a grounding in our core values as librarians and library workers and a commitment to putting those into practice, I think is really important. You know, people ask me all the time, you know, I had an interview with a reporter this week who was like, libraries are transforming to meet the need, you know, like of new AI technology. And, you know, I sense that we're always about to be obsolete. And we're not, right? That libraries have always been at the forefront of technological changes, that we always respond to our communities, that's our job, is to stay on top of what's happening and to shape our services and our resources around the needs that are currently existing in our communities. And so you can't train for the present because the future is just a minute away. So making sure that we teach ourselves and each other and in our programs the importance of being nimble, of being ready to change, that like we pivot. That's what librarians do best. And so making sure that, you know, we both know the current technology, but mostly come out of library school with the mindset that we're always going to be learning forever, I think is really important.
Excellent. I'm very happy to hear that because most of those reflect our new set of competencies that
Excellent.
include things like being agile and and continuously learning, which is one of the things that I find so exciting about this profession and as well. And Nicole has a fun question. What is one of your most recent best reads? If you actually have time to read with your current responsibilities. I never give up reading. It doesn't matter. Even when I was doing my PhD, I have to have like a fun book on the side.
So I'm in an extremely aggressive book club. We read 50 books a year. We have 50 categories. You have to find a book for each category and read the categories. And I'm super committed to it. Because like I'm not good at doing math and spreadsheets, but I'm very good at keeping lists and checking things off. And so I read all the time. I would rather be reading a book right now, but I'm happy to be talking to you also, but I'd rather be reading a book. So I studiously read every day. I think it's really important. And it's one of the ways that I stay grounded. So I've got a couple best reads. The one that was the most fun, and this was for the book category, a book with characters over 65 years old. I read the book Thursday Murder at the Thursday Murder Club. I don't know if people know these sort of mysteries, or detective procedurals. Super fun. It was like eating a big piece of candy. I just loved it. So that was the best. The book that I'm reading right now, that if you haven't read any books by, I've got to look up her name quickly.
Something else
Svetlana. We do. Yeah, right. So look at me. I'm a librarian in action. Svetlana Alexievich. She's a Russian writer who has won the Pulitzer Prize, I think, and she writes these sort of oral history chronicles of life in the former Soviet Union. So I'm reading, she wrote a book about Chernobyl that just gives you a sense of the whole picture of what happened there. So the book I'm reading right now is called Secondhand Time, and it sort of captures the collapse of the USSR and from the perspectives of people from all over the country. And it's really giving me a sense of place and time and history. And I think that we all need that for sure in these difficult times.
Agreed. And so I think that's sort of a perfect tone to end on. So thank you ever so much for this very thought-provoking talk and for sharing your insights with us. And of course, one of the things we all recognize as librarians is the power of storytelling, and the stories that you've shared with us will linger, and we will have more conversations about them. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Sandra, and thanks everyone for joining today.
Oh, would like to ask Norman Horrocks' daughter, Sarah, to join us to say a few words. And Sarah, one of the most interesting things, of course, about our program and about our faculty is the close connections. So Sarah, of course, is not only the daughter of Norman, but she is also a key part of our community. She is an alumni of our Master of Information Management program and has been connected with the faculty in our program in many, many ways. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Sandra, and also Emily for your great talk and discussion about libraries and leadership. I'm here on behalf of the entire Horrocks family to express just our gratitude to Dalhousie and the Faculty of Management for organizing this great event every year. It's such an honor to participate and really to have Dad's memory celebrated in this way. He would have been thrilled with your introduction, Sandra, and for your research, Emily. My sister and I were texting back and forth. Sure that, his cheeks are just pink and my mother's would not be very much. But we have fabulous memories of going to the library with our parents wherever we lived. It was the first stop that we made. So the library blood runs deep in our entire family. So thank you for all of your great contributions to ALA. They're very lucky to have you. And as Sandra mentioned early on in the beginning, so in addition to this lecture, each year the school assesses candidates to select the recipient of the Dalhousie Horrocks Leadership Fund. And this year, the award is going to go to Catherine Gracie. As Sandra mentioned, I too am a Dal grad. So Catherine, I can 100% say you will never regret your choice of following the information program as your field of study at Dalhousie. I read up on your bio, and your multidisciplinary interests are going to serve you so well. You've already made, and you will continue to make, some great connections across a variety of fields. And as that was mentioned, that was something that Dad was really well known for, that and his commitment to societies. And so it's just great that you share those passions. So on behalf of the Horrocks family, again, welcome to the fold. Please accept our condolences at having to spell out our name every time you reference this award, but also please accept our congratulations and very best wishes.
Thank you so much, Sarah and the entire Horrocks family, and Emily for your thought-provoking talk. Since the initial announcement that I received this award, I've been able to connect with a number of Dalhousie alumni and other librarians who knew Dr. Horrocks personally, either through the program or his work with professional organizations. And as Emily noted, it's been incredible to learn more about the life and career of this giant in librarianship. And many have shared their stories with me and emphasized the impact he had on their lives and the remarkable knack he had for working with people. And I have so much respect for the work that Dr. Horrocks did, specifically in leadership, mentoring, and professional service. This award is an incredible representation of Dr. Horrocks' legacy, and I really hope to follow his example in his dedication and passion for our incredible profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and congratulations once again, Kat. And we look forward to following your journey and having you continue to be an active member of our community. At this point, I would like to thank Shelley Lemore and the alumni team and all the people who are working in the back end to make this event happen. This has been recorded, so we will be sending the link to everyone so that you can continue to reflect on the comments of Emily and to rewatch. I also encourage you to stay tuned to our website for upcoming lectures and more. The end of April will be re-envisioning our research day and sort of supersizing it to make it a longer day. So we're excited to send out more details about that soon. Details of the Horrocks Award and how to contribute to it will be displayed at the end. And we look forward to another iteration of this next year. So thank you very, very much to everyone for attending.